Hello everyone, my name is Nick, and this week's plant of the week is Peperomia tetragona, formerly known as Peperomia petiolata. Peperomia tetragona is native to South America, as many other peperomias are, and this is a very easy plant to grow, given you give it enough light. So I'm growing most of my Peperomia tetragonas in windows. Actually, I'm growing all of my Peperomia tetragonas in windows, and I find that's how they grow the best. So they do prefer quite bright light. I wouldn't be surprised if this plant was to burn from a southern-facing window, but I find some really good luck with some my east and west-facing windows for this plant. I'd say the most important thing about this plant is not to water it too much. I think this plant can rot very easily if you're watering it a little too often. So my suggestion would be to let this plant dry out pretty much bone dry. I usually recommend doing my taco tests, which is what I use for peperomias all around my home to see when I need to water them. So I check the bottom leaves of the pot. Sometimes these newer leaves can be a little flimsy as they're quite new and still developing, but I go to some of the more developed leaves in the pot and I kind of try to squeeze it up or down like I'm squeezing a taco shell, or like, in kind of the shape of a taco shell, like a U shape. And if this plant doesn't budge, it's telling me that this does not need any water. It is very well watered, or at least still has enough water in the plant to withstand a little bit more time without it. So I would definitely check that, and then once the plant gets super flimsy, that's when it's time to water. Within a day's time, this plant tends to pop back up and be very succulent once again. So that's just my recommendation. I find I'm probably watering this plant roughly every like 10 to 14 days, and if you are watering this plant more than once a week, I would say it would probably start to get some of the leaves turn brown and fall off as it begins to rot. So I would definitely be wary in that aspect. So giving this plant a good amount of light and not a lot of water would definitely be the best bet. So you would treat it pretty much similar to a succulent. But these plants aren't necessarily succulents, as they do grow in the rainforest, but they are more tropical succulents. So they are just more succulent plants that grow in more tropical conditions. This is typically a common peperomia that you can easily get your hands on at your local garden center, and it's typically pretty inexpensive as well, which is fortunate in case you do end up overwatering this plant and you want to pick up another one. It's not going to put a big hole in your wallet. However, the one thing I do want to mention about this plant is I do have a small pest problem with spider mites with this plant. So spider mites tend to really enjoy these cardboardy leaves that have a lot of ridges on the backside of the leaves. Typically my peperomias are pest free, but these peperomias that have the ridges, I do find that the spider mites can hide in there pretty well. Fortunately enough with this plant, for the nature of the way that it grows, how it's a little bit more succulent and more pale in color, I find that the spider mites don't tend to affect the health of the plant quickly, at least, and they don't affect the look, as spider mites can typically drain the color out of plants and leave them looking a bit pale or yellow. However, this plant is pretty pale to begin with, so I find that it doesn't really harm it there, but I would be wary of the spider mites, as if you don't keep a close enough eye on this plant, they can definitely start to overrun this plant and form quite the colony, so just do be wary in that aspect. This is a really perfect plant for small spaces. All peperomias stay really compact for the most part, so this is rather large for a Peperomia tetragona in a 4-inch pot, I will say. So they will stay rather small. They won't really get bigger than this. And the longer you have them, they'll start to trail similar to a Pothos or Hoya. So they do trail quite more. It's in a more like a aggressive manner, as you can see, compared to a Pothos would. So it's kind of interesting. So I really appreciate that. Anyway, that's going to about do it for this week's plant of the week, Peperomia tetragona. If you are growing this plant yourself, I would love to hear in the comments if you have any care tips in specific. Otherwise, thank you guys so much for watching. If you don't already, follow me on Instagram at Philly Foliage, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys in my next video. Have a great day!